I feel that the themes of DEIB, diversity, equity, and belonging, it's actually quite different from the US. I mean, in US, typically you have certain key themes that actually typically run over the various years. I think in APAC, the themes could be similar, but also very different. So from that perspective, I think you can still continue to what I call keep the lights on activity, right? So it doesn't have to go radio silent. You do not have to suddenly stop doing what you're doing. I think as long as with the local sort of legislation and support, you could still do what needs to be done. You can still push to continue to have conversations.
Welcome to the All in Recruitment podcast by Manatal, where we explore best practices, learnings, and trends with leaders in the recruitment space. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube and Spotify and look for previous episodes as well as stay tuned for weekly episodes. My name is Lydia, and joining us this week is Rajashree Chandramogan from Riot Games. Welcome back, Shri. Good to have you with us again.
Thanks for having me again. Happy to see you as well, Lydia.
So it's been a while since we last chatted, right? And, the technology in the talent space is constantly evolving. So what are some areas that you're focusing on this year, Shri?
I think more and more on AI and the usage of AI, but in the HR space, but of course also generally in business, right? I think there's a lot of questions on, is AI going to put people out of jobs? How is the ethical use of AI in the various different scopes of their roles, including HR? So I think AI continues to dominate a lot of the sort of conversations that we have. DEI is also continuing to dominate a lot of space.
We'll talk about that in a while.
Yeah, exactly. And I think change management and communication is also key. Yes, it feels like COVID is a far-off dream that's happened a long time ago, but the effects of it and, businesses sort of going through layoffs and all that, I think change communication and management is a key focus, especially for HR business partners, which we continue to focus on.
So as businesses not only compete for talent, but also compete for sustainability and profitability in this kind of environment. So how do you as an HRBP work together with the business, to maybe look at or develop recruitment strategies with that broader business objective in mind?
I think I could start with maybe a couple of examples. I think first and foremost, it's no longer about, I think there were times when we had growth mindset and we were talking about growth and expansion, but I think now is sustainable growth, like you mentioned. So one of the things that as a HR business partner, I would have to do is, let's say we are opening a new office in a market, right? We'll have to go in with what are the talents that are available in the market? Does it make sense to open particular roles in this market as opposed to maybe having a augmented sort of a resource model where you could have a couple of roles based in this country because they have a lot of talents versus maybe tech could be from another part of the world, right? So I think a lot of these augmented support models come into play. We're also talking about hybrid working models. And what do I mean is work from home. Or are you going to work from the office? Again, there are more and more companies that are open to having resources that are based outside of where they are. And that comes with pros and cons, right? Some traditional sort of mindsets is that, of course, if you're in the office every day, you're more productive and you are able to sort of have that water cooler conversations, which that is true, but it also does not mean that you're ineffective or unproductive if you're working from home. So I think a lot of the conversations that as HR business partners we deal with is talking about talent in the different markets. What roles make sense for us to open in a certain market versus looking at a more sort of global footprint around hiring resources. There's also conversation on office spaces. How would you like to structure your policies around having folks in office versus remote work? And I think these conversations sort of continue to dominate the space in terms of cost effectiveness.
So in terms of cost effectiveness and also giving that employee experience a more holistic feel, how often do these conversations crop up?
Happens almost every week, right? Mental well-being wasn't just a topic just during the COVID times, right? It still exists. And I think we have conversations such as, hey, look, my family in XYZ country, they're going through some crisis. I need to be there. I need to work from there for perhaps a month, right? And then in a lot of these cases, we work with the managers to see what makes sense for their team. Is this something that's doable? And if it's doable, what are some guardrails that we put in? And how do we also continue to support the employee? Because it's not all about what the company is gaining, but it's also about supporting the employee. So what other support do they need? In some cases, do we look at compressed working hours, right? That's an actual possibility because they may not be able to give us their 9 to 5 or whatever the timings are, given they are dealing with issues over there. So I feel these policy-related conversations and case-by-case employee-related conversations still do come up on a weekly, if not daily basis.
Now, going back to the point you made earlier, I know this is one of those things is augmented work support.
Yeah.
Would you mind elaborating on that and just giving a few examples of what that actually looks like?
So I'm referring to two things here. I think augmented support is where, again, going back to having all your resources in the location that your office is based. And I think a lot of us have come far from that, but still, now that sort of the COVID veil has been lifted, right? I'm sure you have seen there are a lot of conversations about coming back 5 days a week, 9 to 5 back into the office, and how that may or may not work for people anymore, right? Because, obviously their personal lives change, their family situation changes. So then how do we present augmented resource modeling? For example, certain roles, do we have to have them based out of this location? Could it be other locations? In some situations, do we even need to have vendors to support? If it's a 24/7 model, can we get vendors to support and then have some few key folks within the organization? So that continues to be a thread of conversation. And then comes, of course, the hybrid work model, right? Which is, do you work from home? Are you going to have someone who's completely remote? Or do you have sort of a hybrid working arrangement where you come into office 2 to 3 times a week versus working from home like 2 days a week?
So obviously, in many parts of the business, we keep using data to make these informed decisions that actually impact every employee in an organization. Now, as an HRBP operating within this region, APAC, what do you think of the data usage, and what might be some areas of improvement in this aspect?
I think data usage, you're right. Data is, as if you call the new oil, right? So basically, we need that in every step of the way. The data that's typically available are through like engagement surveys, and that too, how often you do those engagement surveys, what does those surveys concentrate on? So a lot of times we get data on net promoter score, how is your morale and motivation like? You have all of those information, but there's also the qualitative information that you still don't get through surveys at times because we, at least where I operate, this is in APAC, we still have cultures that feel hesitant to open up to say what they truly feel on surveys. So while data is important and we try to get sort of majority how the people are feeling through some of this data, there is still the HR business partner touch from qualitative conversations that we have. And some of these, again, because of cultural aspects, are not captured. So then what we do is a combination, right? You use the qualitative sort of, be it one-to-one discussions or monthly meetups together with data that you get from perhaps like this engagement data that I mentioned. And then you focus on how do you put them together and present the case study to the business. Often I feel that it is, while quantitative data gives you the major themes, it's qualitative data that goes into the nitty-gritty of what is it that they want. For example, our office might say, actually, we want more benefits, right? So they're on a scale of 1 to 10, they might say, I'm not satisfied with the benefits as a 5. But when you don't open up an open-ended question of what exactly you're looking for, you're left with just that. And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just to understand, is there a structured way to go about getting that qualitative data once a survey has gone out?
I think it should be together with the survey. So what do I mean is there should be, I wouldn't say equal number, but there should be some space for, folks in the organization to be able to give their comments freely. So not everything is a Likert scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, but there should be open-ended questions where people are able to chime in freely on what is it that they want. Of course, that would also mean it takes a lot of time to sieve through this data, but there are sufficient sort of platforms where, it pulls out keywords for you, it pulls out key themes for you, and then you can use that to deep dive and look into comments.
Now, diversity, DE&I has, obviously this of late we've been seeing lots of discussions about it, different changes policy changes, and it's a major talking point. So, what might be the impact, and what are your thoughts around what's happening, especially in the US? And how do you continue to view DEI in terms of collaborating with recruiting teams to keep building a diverse talent pipeline?
Great question. So, I think obviously what's happening in US does have an impact on all of us. But having said that, I feel that the themes of DEIB, diversity, equity, and belonging, it's actually quite different from the US. In US, typically you have certain key themes that actually typically run over the various years. I think in APAC, the themes could be similar, but also very different. So from that perspective, I think you can still continue to what I call keep the lights on activity, right? So it doesn't have to go radio silent. You do not have to suddenly stop doing what you're doing. I think as long as with the local sort of legislation and support, you could still do what needs to be done. You can still push to continue to have conversations. For example, neurodivergence is such a big topic, right? And while that falls under DEIB, there is nothing that restricts us from coaching or working with our managers how to handle perhaps employees who are neurodivergent. You also don't have to stop or take a backseat when it comes to coaching because this happens on a daily basis in all the managers and our peers, right? You might have hired someone who is neurodivergent who works in a different way. So how do you figure out what working ritual works for them? That doesn't necessarily belong to a DEI program, but that is something we can work with the manager to maybe in a way equip them to handle those situations. Alternatively, you could also have people who might have, mental health issues, family issues, and then you still continue to work. I continue to work in my capacity as a HR business partner on support we can give them from sort of a policy and benefits perspective. Managers continue to then work on creating an environment for them to sort of lean in and see how we can support them. So I think while the DEIB conversations, like maybe the major events and support might take a back seat, it doesn't necessarily stop people in the people space to actually still continue to put out efforts to support people to move through some of the challenges or issues that they are facing in their daily lives.
So moving on to hiring managers, right? What role does the HRBP play in hiring manager enablement? How do you help leaders develop that sort of inclusive mindset or even interviewing capabilities when it comes to recruiting the right people?
I often refer to HR business partnering role as a facilitation role. It's almost like holding the mirror up to the hiring manager, right? So typically when we get involved in a hiring discussion, we always come in from the lenses of, okay, so what is the variety of candidates we have seen, right? Because some HRBPs are involved in interview process, some are not. And I think for myself, I look at, okay, how have we selected this candidate based on what merits? What are some of the, I would push on people's biases if I feel there is. And that's by asking open-ended questions, right? So for example, I think talent acquisition, have always done a great job and they continue to do a great job in improving the diverse slate of candidates they bring for an interview. But it's then ultimately the hiring manager's decision on who they want to hire. And that's when asking questions, sort of having them to relook at what they may not be able to see themselves, which could be certain biases that comes up that we hold up and we talk during sort of the final selection process. And I think that's where HR business partner comes in from a more sort of neutral standpoint. We also talk about internal equity. How is the makeup of the team right now? For example, if it's an all-female team, then we would go like, hey, is there a need, do you think, for us to maybe hire someone different? And then you get that kind of, a lot of people think it's only always about, if it's all male, someone's going to ask that question. No, it's on both sides of the coin, right? And it's about, again, going back to maybe summarizing it, it's about asking the right questions, holding the mirror up to hiring managers for them to have their biases in check.
Now, I know you addressed this earlier, looking at the different, variations or the different situations a company or a team has to face when it comes to work arrangements, etc. But in terms of recruitment and making sure that you actually have that sort of pipeline ready, what might be some ways to think about future-proofing recruitment, so to speak?
Great question. I think from a systems perspective, I think one of the questions I got asked when I went for an event earlier this week was also, hey, but now you're using AI and systems to filter out certain CVs, right? Which is true. There is keyword search, there's all the filtering that's happening. But that's where, as talent acquisition professionals, you come in to look at, is there something that you picked up from a CV that maybe the system didn't pick up, right? So yes, there is filtering done, but I think that's where talent acquisition comes in to say, hey, we know the type of person this hiring manager, this team needs or is looking for. Let's see if we can find someone with that shade, right? So while your applicant tracking system actually does a lot of the pre-selection for you, I think there's still the additional lenses that TA team can come in to sort of ensure that there is that more neutral tone when it comes to selection, at least before the hiring manager has a conversation. I think the future proofing of this also, like I mentioned earlier, diverse slate of candidates. If you leave it up to a system, often, of course, you can put in a lot of inputs and it's able to pull out what you want. But there are, I think, certain shades that may not get picked up. So, for example, a mom who might have taken, a year or two of gap to take care of a child and she's coming back to work, right? There could be situations where these profiles may not have been picked up because some gaps were identified, right? And that's where you come in and go like, well, is this person suitable for the role, right? What can we do to bring this person back in? And what are the kind of questions we should be asking them to see how they have kept themselves updated during the time they are away? And another thing that I think future-proofing the role, which I think this is debatable, but is to talk about remuneration. And I think we are still in a part of world where a lot of questions is typically asked about what was your last drawn salary? I think we need to move away from that. And I think we need to talk about what is it that's a role on the table and what's your sort of proficiency match from a skills perspective. And then do you have the budget to hire the person? And I think that is one way to future-proof to get the right talent into the organization as opposed to bringing in someone based on what they earned previously. How will we end up on the salary range? And that is going to, in my opinion, it turns away candidates and it might set that expectation that it's a bargaining power. Like I can get 5% more, I'm going to jump there, which actually I feel that sometimes companies lose out on the right candidates through this as well.
That's a question of motivation. Then you go back to exactly what is it, and you may have the right kind of two very similar profiles or two very different intent behind them, right?
Correct.
So, final question, Shri, why be an HRBP from your perspective, and why a career in HR for those listening in?
So I'll talk about myself and then I'll go into maybe more general. I think for me, I started my career in talent acquisition, right? I was doing talent acquisition, regional roles across tech and corporate roles. And when the opportunity for HR Business Partner came up, the reason why I was interested is talent acquisition. I always talk about the T-shaped competency, right? Talent acquisition is your depth. HR Business Partner allows you to be, and it's also known as generalist. It gives you a breadth in terms of experience. You cut across DEI, you cut across comp and ben, you look at, OD, organizational development, talent management. And I think that's the great thing about being a HR business partner is that you get to see different facets of HR and work closely with business. It's not just about standing behind policies, but it's about what is it that the business want? How can we enable the business to grow and while being compliant to local legislations. So I like the fact that HR business partnering gives you that business lens in addition to sort of the depth and the breadth of the HR world. HR, to step into what I wanted to say, I think if you want to have a non-confrontational role, if you want a role that is actually something that's not going to make you feel like, did I do the right thing? Then HR is not the role for you. Because HR often puts you in situations where you would actually continue to sharpen your saw. I feel like it's a profession where you would have to upgrade yourself and bring different ideas to the table each time because we're dealing with people and the situations are so varied. So if you're someone who's not just interested in people, but making a difference and learning about business as you grow along, I think HR is the field for you, where you get to learn about business while you get to deal with people, which is essentially the biggest sort of asset that any company have is their people, right? So I think from that perspective, I would say HR to me is the way into understanding people and how do you deal with people. And from there, I think you can take your career to any other role because end of the day, you're going to be dealing with various types of folks in your role.
Well, thank you again, Shri, because it's nice having you back here. And these are incredible insights that you just shared and many different ways to look at the role of a HRBP and how it works into the recruitment process as well. So thank you again. And for those who want to listen in, I know you shared this before on this show, but where can they find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. They can search for me. I can actually share my LinkedIn link later if we could share that anyway. And I think that's the easiest way to find me. And then from there, of course, we could connect further should anyone have any further questions.
Great. Thank you, Shri. And we have been in conversation with Rajashree Chandramogan from Riot Games. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more weekly episodes from All in Recruitment.